Well, hello everyone. Today, actually, I started as of yesterday to begin talking about a social topic that is hot, a social topic that varied in so many different ways, a social topic that is indefinite. There's no obvious cues for it. Oh, by the way, here's a disclaimer. Because I'm going to put this on YouTube, I am not a psychologist, a neurologist. I just happen to have interest in reading about these topics uh, and explaining something that I'm actually dynamically covering. Uh, I don't want to be misunderstood. I'm a YouTuber who is interested in music, who is interested in art, who is interested in, just to make it simple, I'm sort of a Renaissance man. I don't have a TV. I love to read, to share, and I consume a lot of my content by reading and by observing people. And when I'm talking to people about business, I take time to pay attention to special cues on the vocal tone, choice of words, and because besides talking about money is actually very boring in itself. I'm in the people business, not in the money making business. And part of making money is also understanding people. And part of understanding people is understanding people's dreams, people's goals, and people's fears. It so happened that it's a lot easier to talk about your fears, your bad experiences, and what went wrong, what didn't go well, opportunity missed, or opportunity squandered, or in areas where you lose money to scammers, whether it's from a dating, older people, both men and women, who basically are more susceptible to giving to online scams, dating scams, because to make up for the need to be desired, the need for attention, the need to belong to a particular group, because they are socially isolated. Due to their social isolation, uh, not having friends, and probably too picky. It could be for a mixture of things: abandonment, bereavement, uh, uh, or just just people moving apart psychologically. People basically stop growing as a unit, as a collective, and as a result, loneliness can creep in as soon as two people start growing together as a unit. In other words, if more likely, if you marry your high school sweetheart, it's not so much that you marry your high school sweetheart. You have to continually grow together, because people change over time. A year is a long time in a relationship, and it could be like a slow growth, one mundane day after another. But a year, two or 3 or 4 years, uh, people people change according to the music they listen to, according to the movies they watch, according to the magazine and the books they read or don't read, and the social contact or that they have or don't have. And there might be, uh, consider like two people or two bicyclists, okay, who are basically just like riding on the dirt road, and they come in on a fork. If they didn't decide in the beginning, or if there's not a leader who decides where to go, well, technically the decision is a split decision to either go left or right. But if there is a leader saying, okay, I take the lead wherever I go, you follow, well, you have two different individuals. One person might see going left or going right might be more advantageous, roads are smoother, and there is somewhat of an end in sight. And the other person might see the challenge, the bumps. There's no end in sight. It's good to discover. So you might find an adventurous person versus a person who just like to be comfortable. And over time, those behavioral habits are more grounded and formalized and sustained, and people may not like change. And here you are, you're an adventurous person who married the couch potato, or who is in a relationship with the couch potato, and you no longer have the same interest. One does not have the same drive for certain physical activity, especially as age crept in. And oh, by the way, I was watching a video today, or I watched a video today, where because I wanted to have context to talk about this subject, because the subject is so vast. So the interviewer made the comment, and then one person writes in a comment in text that the disabled are ignored. I mean, think about it. You're disabled and isolated, and perhaps even older, so you have physical challenge where you're not mobile as the average person, and you're isolated. So you're physically isolated due to the disability. You're socially isolated due to lack of friends, because you cannot be easily go do things that you like to do, and you like mobility, and perhaps not surrounded by family and friends to basically help you navigate your mobility in the age of, even where people are close together, they are isolated to begin with mentally, and you're perhaps dealing with a physical inability. Now, it's one thing to be isolated, but not lonely. You can be physically isolated but have lots of friends, because if you have lots of friends, even though you may have a physical disability, that prevents you to have the mobility you need to function as a normal person. But it's another to be physically disadvantaged and socially isolated and personally lonely, due to the fact that you are not connected to a social group. You are not connected to like a church group, to a civic organization. You're not part of any kind of physical meeting type of. You don't have close friends nearby, and for anything that you need, whether you own your house or you rent your house, if you need to have your house taken care of, you have to basically you have to pay for everything. And I've had some experience. We have some really super nice physically disabled people, or physically challenged people, who are incredibly nice. It's just a breath of fresh air. You want to do everything for them, but not necessarily enabling them, because when you leave, it becomes difficult for them after they have company, if you're doing anything for them. So you don't want to do too much for them, so that way they feel like they're to disrespect them. But at the same time, if they do struggle with something, there's a need and desire to help. And then on the other hand, you have people who are disabled, who are incredibly short, and who can come across rather rude, but they're dealing with so much challenging on a daily basis. If you take time to not get so easily offended, and basically take time to listen to them, and take time not to react to the tone of voice, choice of words, or the shortness, or the briskness of how their tone of voice can rise or suddenly, simply due to they're impatient. They have a certain ways they do things, and you have to basically pay attention to the special ways, because just because you're mobile doesn't mean that you have to like go. For a physically challenged person, you have to be very careful work according to their pace, help if asked and not imposed, um, to basically respect their boundary. That's one. Respect and communicate, because they need that, and then at the same time, and understand, ask first if there is a method that they like to do something, as opposed to assume that this, you want to get it done to get it done, but you may not necessarily meet the person's need. The greater need is the need to engage. So the dialogue is more important than the physical act of doing something for them they can do for themselves, even though it might take time. But it took me a while, and because I took time to listen sometimes to people, to understand their story. I've had some times where I had a couple of individuals, being short, and here I am thinking I'm helping and doing something for them, but that was not their need. Their need was to conversate, to communicate, to have a dialogue, doing something that they may or may not need help with. It's more of the social connection, the conversation, because after you're gone, that conversation piece will not be available to them, but they still want to be able to navigate and do things for themselves and not depend. Anyways, I probably spend a little bit more time than that. I spent that little time on this topic to show the respect that, because it could be me who was physically disadvantaged at one point, and so not to necessarily omit someone who's dealing with physical challenge, and also physically disconnect or physically distance from the association of other people, but not necessarily socially isolated. So it's really it's a delicate balance. Anyways, so since there are so many variants to loneliness, uh, even at church, you can be in a church full of people, and it's not impossible. Everyone's worshiping, everyone's, hugging each other before or after. It's not impossible. Right there in the midst of social fellowship, in an environment where that's the last place you think you would find a lonely person, but it is also the one place that you would find a lot more lonely people than you think. Well, let's start with church leaders, for instance. Okay, some work and some don't, and those who work, uh, once they're done with the activity that they do on a daily basis, the Bible study group, the prayer group, the this group, the that group, managing the schedule for the church, and then, in between, when the phone is not ringing, the text is not coming in, and it depends also on the person as well. Then you have pretty much an entire day, plus everyone's calling you, this is what's happening, and so is having an issue with when so and so, and then the church could be led by, the management team, the church management team, the organization team, the worship team. There could be many various groups, and in between that, you're dealing with logistics, but it's a human who's managing the logistics, and in between logistics comes downtime, and that downtime, if the person dealing with the downtime is not psychologically healthy themselves, spiritually connected to the source, and also maritally connected and grounded in their personal relationship with their loved ones, then in between being the busybody stuff, the humanistic stuff. It is very possible that a typical minister goes through the motion because he or she has the ability to go through the motion, but not spiritually connected to the source. In other words, an intellectual person can go through the motion of preaching a very eloquent message, but that message can be preached from a purely human energy, based on ability to communicate, but not necessarily be connected to the source, to the divine that they worship. But you have a charismatic, eloquent individual who happens to have a very amiable personality, can carry on for months, even a few years, based on human competence alone. Now, you're not going to be able to do that for long, obviously, because you are one adversity, one social challenge away to be noticed, and for your true human nature to come through. But at the same time, it is possible that the loneliest person in the church can be a church leader, a deacon, who's busy doing stuff, typical people-pleasing activities, and not necessarily be connected. So just because someone is a church leader, just because someone is a church administrator, just because someone is a worship leader, a minister, a deacon, a pastor, not necessarily be spiritual, because that spirituality is an inward game that could be portrayed based on human talent alone. So most people who are prone to be in this type of professions are people who are social, capable, amiable, and somewhat disciplined, and a certain degree of caring. So you could be doing a huge part of that on human talent alone for a while, and be at the same time extremely lonely, because the typical person who has a job cannot relate to what you do on a daily basis. And so loneliness is a dynamic fluid, just like air, just like water. Water takes whatever form takes the form of whatever substance that you put it in, or I would like to think that loneliness and isolation is also as dynamic as the air that we cannot see, as water takes various forms and adapt. And so there's not necessarily one form of loneliness. There are a multitude of loneliness. Each person suffers from loneliness in different ways. And okay, here's a thing. I lost my mother years ago. My mother has a certain demeanor about her, calm, quiet, but very connected and loving and caring. During the process of doing the due diligence to do things, and the funeral and all that stuff, I was the administrator. There was no place for emotion because things needed to get done. My sister had two young baby girls, a year apart from each other, so there was no time to really be emotional. I had to be on my game, and also invoke the help of cousins to help with certain things. And my uncle was still alive at the time, getting advice from him, because this is the first time that I had to deal with this issue, and we were living in different states. And while I was there, I was emotionally shut down, and I was on performance mode, on doing the son's duty type of things, the financial part, the logistic parts, and making sure everything is done okay. It was until I came back that all it took for me to break down was a scent, a certain smell of a type of food, or every elderly woman of certain age. I would see my mother's face, and depending on the demeanor, depending on the gesture, tone of voice, and I would be instantly affectionate towards an elderly woman, because there was a need to be connected in that level, and I would break down and cry for no reason at different times. But when I was in the moment getting things done, there was no need for emotion. There was no need for doing any of that. Even to this day, tears may not come down because it's been long over for 20 years or so. But the feeling, the emotion, I like to draw, so I could see the various feature patterns on my mother's face, and caricature-wise, visualize, and sometimes I would even have sort of like almost like waking dreams that she's talking to me sometimes, guiding me, and sometimes the dreams are so vivid I would think that my mother was actually right next to me. I woke up and we were talking, or she was preventing me from doing something. It's very, very, very strange. And the other time I think she was still alive. Somehow I would walking down the street, that I would still see her one day in person. That's how vivid the dreams are. And sometimes you could be lonely, and sometimes you put a smile in my face, and sometimes it's exactly what I needed to make me feel grounded, that I'm not alone, because I was the only son. And yeah, and it doesn't take much. A smell, food, even a certain color of a dress or certain fabric pattern that she wore or liked, and I would see her face in even people who are not necessarily black, Asian, Indian, white, mixed. I would see facial caricature patterns, and especially when I'm more prone to pay attention to an elderly woman when I'm talking to them. I listen probably a little bit deeper, and as I'm talking to them sometimes, and I would look at the facial expression, the body language, the mannerism, and if I pay too much attention, sometimes it's almost like I would see a part of me would want to see my mother's, mannerism, facial features, and the like. So, anyways, and during that time, I could be talking to a person and be totally disconnected, be physically present but socially isolated. I'm in a different world at the moment, even though we're having a conversation. Or I would be in a split, paradigm shift of what I like to see or what I missed versus who's in front of me. So much so, missing her, I project her into the person that I'm talking to. So it doesn't really matter what the person looked like. I can infuse her. My imagination is active enough to infuse her, to give her physical form. And but that also happens the longer I spend not talking to my sister, the more my mother's is in my conscience, my dreams, and more. I'm actually getting a little bit deeper because I want to connect with you and I want you to understand that loneliness can creep in so many different ways. Isolation can creep in so many different ways, and so many dimensions can cause physical isolation and or social isolation, where you are physically present but distant and not connected. So just because you are, you could be in a family, in a marriage, in a business, in at work, have a great job, but you're not there. You're lonely, even though you're in the presence of a lot of people. Or you could be um, not in the presence of a lot of people, but socially connected. It all depends on the person, and the feelings, uh, the nuances are different from one person to another. So anyway, as we dive into the subject, um, I hope I'm bringing you value and actually also open up a little bit, because if I'm not vulnerable with you, you will not feel connected with me. And the whole idea is to feel the connection, uh, and in a sense, like I'm walking into. It's almost like I'm pulling you in to my world, and also help you connect with some similar pattern in your own life, and so that way you are not feeling disconnected, even though you and I may be physically isolated. The idea is we can be connected, even though you're watching this video after I've made it, and it's possible that we feel like an emotional connection, even though you're seeing it after I may be doing something else. The idea is that for you to pick up the phone or get out and meet a friend and talk in person, not in social media. You meet with the person physically, turn off the phone so that way you don't get distraction, so you can connect with the person one-on-one, and detach from social media as much as possible, disconnect from the TV, or better yet, don't have one at all, because there's nothing good that comes from a TV. So that way you can devote more time and personal one-on-one, face-to-face, or via FaceTime, Zoom, meet up, group. If you have the ability to physically connect with people one-on-one, a beautiful way to do so is by going to theater. You can go to a musical. Tomorrow I'm going to a concert by two classical pianists with a good friend. We just find out that we both love the same things, and we also just find out that it's difficult for us to find people who are like-minded, who like the same things we like. So we've been to multiple classical concerts, she and I, and turned out to be a very good friend, and instant rapport, because we like the same things. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're agreeing on every subject, but we share that common shared interest, and each have a desire to seek for more ways to participate in live concert as opposed to go alone. So in the same, it may not be classical music for you. It may be just a pop music, or it may be a ball game, whatever sports that you like, or pick up a chess where you can play online with other people. There are so many things you could do to avoid the loneliness. Anyways, I do hope that this is helpful, and I'm passionate about this subject, as you can tell, and there's a need for it, and I don't want my channel to be simply about money. However, there is an economic. You cannot separate social isolation, loneliness, from the economic cost of it. So obviously, I do intend to cover the economics of it, where I could use some fancy slides and go in depth. But if I'm like speaking heart to heart with no distraction, while I'm also enjoying some fresh air, going out for a walk, where I can speak from heart to heart and not be distracted uh, by emails and DMs and all that stuff. And yeah, you cannot separate the economics from the cost of isolation and loneliness, because it does cost an isolated person more for everything, you know, and the powers that be would like to perhaps keep it that way, because an isolated person is an asset, is an economic asset to. Anyways, well, isolation is a liability to you, but it's an asset to someone else. That's all I say about that, without ending in a very down statement. Anyways, it is a pleasure. I do hope that you find value in this, and if you do, like, share, and express, because you can actually give me ideas for my next video as we embrace and engage in this topic of loneliness. It could be physically separated, but you don't have to be isolated. A phone call away, an email away, a Zoom away with loved ones is all you need to be socially connected.